my mother was talking about how he got a new toy and he was excited, and that my father was gonna, sort of test out his new toy or something right before he got mad at me. Right, I was just sitting on the carpet, and I was too young to know what a gun was, and I just find that odd that he was all giddy about his new toy right before he got angry at me, and I had no fucking clue what I did to deserve his wrath. I was just sitting there minding my own business, and he starts yelling at me, and he says, "This is the last thing you're ever gonna see. Look at it. I want you to look at it because it's the last thing you're ever gonna see." And it wouldn't go off, and it jammed right away. Like the first time he tried to use it, at least to use it on me, and he got pissed off, talking about it was cost him a lot of money. It's supposed to be a good one, and it doesn't even work, and he starts hitting it, and he's just furious and yelling, and many minutes pass where he's trying to get it to unjam, and then finally he gets up and says, "You got lucky. Next time you're bad, this will be the last thing you ever see." And he tells me to remember that. He several days later either gets it fixed or gets a new one, and my mother is giddy and my father is both of them are very giddy that his gun now works, and my mother keeps calling it his toy, his new toy. I remember congratulating him in one way or another, saying, "Yay, it's fixed," because I didn't even know. That's how little that I knew. That's how young I was. Honestly, it's right at the age where you may or may not remember, 3 or 4. Anyway, so he, again, I'm sitting on the carpet, grey carpet, short, grey-ish carpet, and minding my own business, just looking at the carpet is all I remember. And he gets really angry, yells at me out of the blue again, and tells me to look up and say hello, and then he gets even more mad when I don't follow his orders, and I ask why, and he gets even more mad, and he yells at me so many times, and I just find it easier to do what he asks, so I look up and say hello. And at that point I remember, even though I didn't know what it was, I remember the vision, I remember the way that it looked, the way that barrel of the gun looked. I remember it, exactly how the barrel of a gun looks when you look dead at it. So I had the memory of visually what it was before I was ever told the name of it. And about the time I said hello, that's when the loudest sound I've ever heard in my entire life, and then simultaneously felt like I was getting electrified, stabbed and burnt all at the same time. The first time it jammed, it didn't even go off, which makes me think something paranormal with my spirit guardians, they were trying to protect me. This time something paranormal happened again. It went off, but it was supposed to get, it started right here, which means it should have been a direct hit to my heart, and he was only 4 or 5 feet away from me. He was standing up, pointing down at me, so it should have gone directly through me, through my entire heart. Instead, it does this. It goes around like that, and then goes in my side and out my back, missing pretty much everything. Scrapes through a few bones and maybe my lung, but all my really vital organs, it bypasses. And it really, really hurt. And I had trouble breathing, but I was all right. I'd gone like this at some point, I think, or like this, I don't know, and I got fragments in this forearm. Most of them were small and they could pick it out. And I think some of those fragments could have, if I was going like this instead of this, some of those fragments could have ricocheted and hit off my chest and hit that. I don't know how but anyway, there's one that won't come out and they're trying to pick it out, and they say if I don't stop squirming and complaining, it's going to stay there for life. Well, I couldn't stop squirming, and they said, all right, it's going to stay there for life then. And several days later, I hear him talking on the phone with somebody, talking about evidence, and you know, I don't know what evidence is, and I was one of those children that had to know everything, so I kept asking what evidence was, and I think I wouldn't remember that part had I not been so inquisitive as a child, you know, to desperately know what things meant. And, you know, I think he might have explained in a very botched way what it was, but not fully. He said that, you know, we had to go to the doctor and get it out. And I said, well, I thought that you know, it had to stay in me forever, you know. I didn't understand. I kept wanting to know why. Because I don't trust that his change of heart is a good thing. It just seems too suspicious. We get to the doctor. The actual doctor, I think, was in on it, was a part of this Abrahamic cult that my family belongs to. But the receptionist was not. Because the receptionist, what she did was what anyone should do. You know, I overhear them saying, well, we would have, it was a hit and run, but we didn't think anyone would believe us, so that's why we waited. And she kept saying, well, it's immensely infected, you know, anytime somebody gets shot, especially a child, you need to take them to the doctor right away. You can't wait. And she was just talking about the fragment, you know, she hadn't even seen the giant hole that went through my side and out my back. But it's now filled with pus by now, by the way. So we go into the doctor's office, and the doctor, you know, I thought was really kind, because here she is being the only person in my mind I don't understand about evidence. And so in my mind, she's the only person kind enough to take this out in my arm. And I start crying with gratitude. And I think if she's kind enough to take this out of my arm, maybe she'll take the one out of my back. And so I ask her, and then she looks at it and she says, oh, honey, I can see it. It just went straight through, in one side, out the other. It's a clean cut. I can see it. It's fine. You know, she refused to do any x-rays or anything to actually see whether or not any bones were broken, or whether or not there were any smaller fragments. That there's no way that you can look at it, just like looking at it, and tell whether or not the entire bullet went out, and or whether or not it broke bones in the process. You know, there may be something in there, a fragmented bone in the very least, that could, you know, cause an immense infection or something. You know, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but, you know, I have common sense. She should have x-rayed it. Anytime you get shot like that, you should be x-rayed. She wouldn't. So she refused to treat it at all. She refused to do anything to it. And about that time, police show up, because the receptionist had called the police. And I remember the police telling my parents, you know, oh, we understand, you know, it's just what, we have to respond, it's you know, it's the law, we have to respond. And, you know, my family getting very upset, going into another room to be talked to separately, saying something about a hit and run. I had been told to say hit and run. That's what I had been told to say. I'd been told to memorize that. And so when they asked me, I just kept saying hit and run. And they said, you're too young to know what hit and run means. And they asked me to explain it, and I couldn't. And they said, don't be afraid, just tell us what really happened. And finally I said, Daddy, but he's going to get mad. Don't tell him that I said it, Daddy did it. Despite all of that, you'd think that there'd be more investigating. No, they were allowed to, that very same hour, they were allowed to be set free and take me back home. I was sent home with no more than some antibiotics. And a week or two later, some fragments come out that hole in my back. And I say to my father, look, no, well, hold on, back up, because I want to say something before that. Before the police came, the doctor was looking at this, and she actually brought in for a second opinion, another doctor, because she was looking at the way the bullet did that weird, and she said, have you ever seen a bullet take this path? And he said, no. Does this make any sense in physics? He said, no. She could not wrap her head around how something, because physics, it should have gone right in with physics. So she could not wrap her head around how it did this weird thing to bypass my heart and go through my side like that. And that's why I think, especially with confirmation of just how much she was perplexed by it, means that it only greatens my theory that my spirit guardians had something to do with that they diverted the path of the bullet, so that it wouldn't go directly in. So anyway, moving on. So I'm sitting here going, see, there's something in my back. I wasn't being a wuss. This came out my back. I told you there was something in my back. And my father gets angry at me and says, shut up, stop complaining. It's just bone. It's just bone. And he looks at it and, then, says, did you see any more of these pieces? I said, yeah, I've been putting them in the trash because I didn't think that she would listen to me until there was a bigger one. So I waited for a bigger one. And he got furious. He said, what trash? Where? And he ordered me to get all of them out of the trash, to find them, because he was afraid that one of those fragments could potentially not be bone. It could be evidence. It could be part of a bullet. So they scratched that off of their list as, a way to kill me. Just one more way that they knew that they couldn't kill me. And honestly, I think it attracted too much attention and they got scared. They're cowards. And so, that's why a lot of this later on in life, especially when I began to remember more, when it's easier to cover things up if there's nothing physically that people can see outwardly. Like poison, you can't see that outwardly. It's a lot easier to cover up.